Hi, everyone, and welcome to my podcast, Help Me, Rhonda. My name is Dr. Rhonda Karg. I'll be your host today. And my special guest today is Derek, and I've known Derek since I was a kid. And Derek has an amazing, inspirational story about his recovery, the tragedy, the adversity that he was able to overcome. Today, even though Derek has had one of the hardest lives of anyone I know, he continues to show up and be positive and helpful and gets outside of himself and just lives a life that really resonates with me. So I'm really grateful that you're here today. I'm excited to hear more about your story. And without further ado, I'll go ahead and turn it over to you, Derek.
Thanks for having me on.
Thanks.
I guess we'll start with 1986. Lived in very rural Pennsylvania, being 6 and feeling that we're invincible and bulletproof. Did some things that we probably shouldn't have been, drinking alcohol and partying. I got into a vehicle with a friend who had not been at this party. He had been at another party. Unbeknownst, he had been drinking. We all had been drinking. We got in the vehicle. You pick up my brother, who was 15 at the time, and on the ride from picking him up, the gentleman crashed the vehicle. I lost both legs. The vehicle caught fire. Severe burns. My brother was ejected from the back and killed. There was 4 other kids in the vehicle who were all seriously injured. I'm sure you remember all this. I spent about 4 months in Boston, Shriner's Burn Unit. Great place. And then another 8 months in Philadelphia in recovery from the trauma. It was tough. I think the only thing that really was going for me was being young. If I wasn't 17, I don't think I would have been able to physically recover from it. But the physical aspect is the easy part. The mental part is where, we just don't have the tools to treat all of that. And that can lead to substance abuse, trying to cope. Mm-hmm. And it went to a dark place. For years, I didn't have an issue with alcohol. Mine was more chemicals, meth, cocaine at times. The thing that saved me was my children. Once my daughter was born, that was the catalyst to wake up and be responsible and be present. Because without being present, that child did not ask to come into this world. She was here because of my actions. Therefore, I was responsible.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And you were a young parent like I was, right?
I was 22.
Yeah. I was 20. When I had him, I was 19 when I was pregnant, so technically I'm a teen mom, but I had the same experience with my son. I mean, he's 33 now, but I had that same experience of him really saving my life. I was wild. I was at the party that you guys were at when you had the accident. And it devastated the community. It devastated all of us. And we all loved Gene and you, and we were drinking. It could have easily been me. It could have easily been anybody. And for some reason, some of us that go through trauma experience it in a very different way. I think it definitely can affect us in a dark, heavy, destructive way for years afterwards. I see that time and time again. But there's some of us that are able to get to the other side of it and thrive in the face of adversity. And honestly, we don't really know that much in the research about people that thrive in the face of adversity, because unfortunately we've spent decades looking at psychopathology and how people are not doing okay instead of
Yes.
looking at people that are doing okay. So this happens to be like a personal passion of mine, is just understanding how it is that some people are able to be like you are, that are like stronger and way advanced and really thriving in
Yeah.
the face of tragedy. So what do you think the secret is for some of
Well, a couple
us?
things happened. I did not know Gino died right away. They did not tell me. They told me he had a broken leg. So I woke up and realized I had lost my legs. That was my deciding point of whether I wanted to fight or not. I could have easily crossed over. Not if I would have known he was dead, I would have given up. And I, you know, I have a problem with that not being told, you know, but I understand why my mother did it. She didn't want to lose two children, and that's understandable. Other coping mechanisms, like I said, they were my main goal. A career would really also helped. I decided to become a 911 dispatcher, and I worked for the county for 15 years doing that. And helping other people was my jam. I couldn't be a fireman because I physically couldn't do that, but I could get you an ambulance in 3 minutes, and I could do CPR over the phone. I've even delivered kids over the phone.
Wow.
And got to meet the kid too.
That's incredible. Wow. That's amazing. Yeah. So that helped you a lot. And the rehab that you went to for that year after the accident, when they
Yeah,
worked on, you got some mental health
yeah.
help there.
In order for us to leave Boston, we had group therapy every day. And a bunch of 17, 16-year-old kids just talking. They didn't guide it because we all wanted to share our stories amongst each other. So it was less guided and more like sitting out and hanging out. And that was very helpful because I could look at that kid and say, I know you feel how I feel because you are missing a limb, or you were burned, or you had trauma. And we all felt equal there. It was a safe place. And that was the most effective for me, realizing that the transition from being capable to handicapped was permanent. And having older kids there that have been doing it longer, they helped. They helped a lot. Therapy I recommend for everyone.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yes. Well, I'm definitely a believer in it because it's what I do for work. But, you know, I love what I do so much. I mean, it gets me so juiced to work with people. I mean, to the extent that I work very long days, I see about twice as many patients as most people see a week.
Mhm.
I have two other part-time jobs, and I have this podcast. And I love it all. And I work until 10:30 or 11 o'clock at night, and it doesn't feel like work. Like if I literally was like, okay, it's really time for you to go to bed now. But I love this work, and I love to see people grow and heal and recover from the most tragic things. And it's just really touching and beautiful to be able to witness that in other people like yourself. So, I mean, thank you, just for sharing what it's been like for you and for your vulnerability and like willingness to talk about things. So, what got you through the substance abuse stage?
I didn't have an alcohol issue. It was more a chemical dependency. Once my daughter was born, that stopped. Um, I didn't need rehab. I wasn't, it was all my pain, and literally because I had been traumatized. My daughter,
Mhm.
and my son were enough to focus away from that purpose. I think people without purpose, it's a purpose, whether it's to care for someone or to even take care of yourself.
Mm-hmm. But it was literally like you had the kids and you never looked back. Like that.
I never abused it. I may have recreationally used, but I was not dependent drug addict.
Okay.
Before, yeah, absolutely. I was doing it daily.
Yeah.
To cope.
Right.
The people I was around weren't, at that time, were not the right people to be around. Because I had gotten money from the settlement, and that's all they were interested in. Was I had access for money to get the drugs.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, vicious circle.
That's so unfortunate. Wow.
I wound up getting more help as I got older. My mom started a MAD chapter here in Bradford County. It's Mothers Against Drunk Driving.
I remember, right.
Yep, and she would do speakings to convicted people who were forced to go to court because of their actions before many DUIs. And I started going with her and speaking at these events. And I did it for about a year and a half, until I started seeing the same faces coming back. Then I realized by this time, you're not going to reach them. They've already established that pattern, and my story's not enough. So I decided that talking to kids at school, get them before they start this behavior, that maybe the shock of seeing me and my story, if that saves one kid, it was worth the hour of discomfort of seeing what happened.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And I've had kids come up to me after speaking to them and literally look at me and go, how did you do that? And the only answer I could give is, you can't quit, and you can't let, how can I put this? You can't let the weight of the world beat you down, because if you do, the outcome is permanent. And I already almost died once, so I wasn't ready for that.
Mm-hmm.
Good friends are another thing. Talk to your friends, talk to people. We don't know if anything's wrong. We're not in each other's heads. I mean, we could tell you're upset, but we don't know what's going on. Talk to your friends, tell them how you feel. What's the worst thing that can happen? They laugh at you. I've been laughed at a lot of times. Who cares?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But holding it in is explosive. It's a recipe for disaster.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Right. I think that looking at, let's say, the popularity of like 12-step programs, I believe that's one of the reasons why 12-step programs work, having been in AA,
Yes.
the last 16 years, almost 16 years,
Good for you.
that social support is really where it's at, and that sense of belonging and that feeling of like connection with other people. And it can be really helpful to know that you're possibly helping other people, possibly inspiring other people. When you were sharing that story of how you inspired people, that, I had someone come up. I've had this happen like a handful of times over the years, people that I don't remember in my past, but like I used to bring AA meetings to like inpatient mental health units and like share with them. And some of the people that heard my story in those meetings were inspired and like felt really grateful that I was part of their own healing journey, and like people running up and hugging me, and it's a really good feeling to know that you have like helped people.
It was very healing. It's very healing to tell a story and see that people are touched by it. I think it heals you in the inside also. It heals the storyteller and the listener.
That's a really great point. That's a really great point. Why do you think that is? That's
I,
interesting.
I think that knowing that all I went through can change someone else's decisions in the future is powerful, because our decisions are our consequences. Whatever we do, there is a consequence. And at 16, you don't think about that. You think you're invincible. So yeah, it definitely, I would say one of the biggest helps was helping other people.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
I don't know how to explain it.
mm-hmm.
I had a 16-year-old girl come up to me after we did a meeting and tell me she got in trouble with her parents because they were drinking and driving, and she refused to get in the car after seeing the show. She said no, and she called the police, and there were consequences to this, but her parents got help, and she didn't get hurt. So if that's the one person I helped, I'm happy with that.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, I actually remember a time when my son was a toddler, and we were at a gathering, and somebody that was drinking wanted to get him in the car with him, was going to take him for a ride. And I said, no, you're not. That, like, actually, believe it or not, really strained our relationship, because I said, no, like, no, you're not going to drink and drive with my son in the car. Thank you.
Yeah.
So those of us that were friends of yours that were affected by that, I think that, like you said, the more people, reaching out to these kids in high school, or being involved in some way, with maybe raising awareness about, this is what happens. This is literally what happens. And,
Happens
like,
every day.
yeah, yeah,
And they're preventable. It's preventable.
right, absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, and unfortunately, and I know this is definitely true of me, when you're drinking, sometimes you don't realize how impaired you actually are. Like, you feel fine, but you're
Yep.
not. And so, like, what I say to people is, if a kid ran out in front of you, would your reflexes be the same? Would you be able to stop? People say no, probably not. No, my reflexes would be slower. And I'm like, okay, there you go. Like, maybe you shouldn't be driving,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I was interested in hearing, I know that you had mentioned that plant medicine has been part of your journey, so I'd love to hear more about that.
Yeah. This is something we didn't talk about before, but I will talk about it a little more. From being in so much pain, I was prescribed opiates. It was back when opiates were a big issue. So for many, many years, I was medically addicted, prescribed opiates. In the last
Mm,
2 years, I started using cannabis more and got off the opiates by using plant medicine. Um,
mhm,
I don't think people realize, in my opinion, all the cures are in this planet. Everything that ails you is here. We just haven't found it yet. And
mhm,
psychedelics, mushrooms, for people
mhm.
that have really, really deep trauma, I think it would help them, because you are able to separate yourself in different ways that you can't when you are not under the influence of, the psychedelic. And with guided therapy, yeah, I see big, big, big promises here.
Mhm, mhm. Have
Finally,
you have you gone through that kind of therapy?
um,
Like,
I have not taken. I've taken psychedelic mushrooms through a guided meditation with a friend.
uh-huh.
I'm not through a professional, and it was very helpful, very, very
Was
helpful. But he's
was
experienced, and
right.
that's what he does. If anyone wants to explore that, there's ways to do it. Just go on and do it safely.
Right. And having someone there that's sober, in case it's not a good experience for you, is always a really good idea. And
Yep.
especially even better if they're professionally trained, or not even professionally trained, but that they've gone through it. Maybe they're a shaman, maybe they're, there's people that can walk you through those experiences safely,
Spirit guide.
and not just go out here not knowing what you're taking or the dosage or the effect
Mhm.
it's going to have on you, and you maybe have a bad experience with it. It's like, no, we're talking about something completely different. So like, don't do that
Well, my experience
alone.
with LSD was different. LSD is a different. The plant medicine is more spiritual. If you're going to take mushrooms, it takes you to a very spiritual place. You can feel it. I don't know how to explain it, but you can feel that this is. It's like you're touching the hand of God. LSD doesn't do that. It's a little more scary in my. It doesn't seem as natural. Um, I think more people, and we've talked about this before, that clinical trial that's coming out with the MDMA. That's so many people that have had trauma that they don't know how to process. And one of the experiences I had when I did do mushrooms was an ego death. And the only way to explain it is to literally feel like you're dying, but not your body. Part of the pain you've been carrying with you dies. And when you come out of that, it's like a weight lifted off of you, and you see the world in a whole different light. It's another thing. You feel connected to a source that you don't feel when you are not experiencing hallucinogens.
Wow, that's amazing. That's amazing. I do. I know plant medicine has helped lots and lots of people. I personally, I think there's a time and a place for pharmaceuticals for some people, but I see medicine is having a ton of potential, and it's so exciting that, the MDMA is in the third phase of the clinical trial, and
Yep.
then if it passes and the results are as positive as they were for the first two clinical trials, FDA will have to approve it, and that'll be really exciting. But MAPS, that organization MAPS, they've been around for decades. I actually, when I was coming back from Nicaragua a few weeks ago, met the guy that was the founding member of MAPS, which was pretty interesting.
Cool.
And he said they've been working on this for decades. It's taken decades, of like really hard work. So I'm excited for him, and I'm excited for other people that have taken it as far as they have. Their dedication to get this approved so that people don't have to worry about it, and like people that are trying to get cannabis legalized. And
well, if you think about it, our ancestors already did the clinical trials for thousands and thousands of years. They knew what these medicines did.
Yes, I know.
And all that knowledge is lost, so we've got to start from scratch.
Right. So, what about your spirituality? Tell me more about that.
I identify as, I guess, pagan. I don't really follow anything but nature. My church is outside. And there's spirit in everything. Even rocks have spirits. And it's in nature is where reverence lies. So if you feel bad, go in the woods. I'm telling you. When you sit in a quiet woodland glade, there's no way you can't feel better. That's our natural path. We weren't born to be in the city. And I was raised Christian. That didn't work for me. I have a problem with someone between me and my divine. Another human being should not relegate my relationship to the divine. And that's what got me into paganism. And it's more of a respect for nature, a love for nature, and to nurture nature. I mean, one of our mottos is, "In harm none, do as you will." As long as you're not hurting anyone, you can do whatever you want.
I'm down with that. I like
And
it. And I like the connection with nature. I'm down with that too. That sounds really cool.
yeah, most of the religion that is, especially the Abrahamic religions, are following pagan holidays. Easter, Ostara, the equinox, and that's deep seated in us because it's our
Mhm.
primary religion before they got smarter or whatever people want to call it. We are nature's children. One love. We are all Earth's children.
Right. Right. And when you look at the Aborigines people, right?
Well, think about it. How many depressed people do you see in those villages in Africa?
Right.
They're not. They're not.
Mhm.
They don't have the day-to-day stress we do, and they have community, which is, although we have thousands of people around us, what community do you have? A few friends, and that's changing, and I hope it gets better.
So what are your practices? What are your spiritual practices like now?
Um, we do basically, we have 8 Sabbaths, which fall along the equinoxes. There's 4 equinoxes and 4 solstices. Basically, praying to the heavens and acknowledging that there is out there greater than us that we do not comprehend, and reverence for it enough and respect
Mhm.
for it is in order to gain, I don't know, enlightenment, I guess. I guess that's
Mhm.
what we're all looking for is enlightenment.
Mhm. Mhm.
It's not a
So that,
very organized religion. I mean, there's not a church down the street where you
yeah,
can practice
right.
paganism.
Right, right. There's
And
quite
a
a few
lot
people here. I don't know. There's a lot of pagans here in Asheville.
it's picking up in popularity because A, there is no person in between you and God. No one telling you what you can and cannot do. We have a strict set of rules, but they're very loose rules. You know, the main one is don't hurt anybody, and you can do what you want.
Mhm. Mhm.
And I think that transfers nicely to a lot of people because I think they feel that when you have another person telling you how to get somewhere, that's not your own personal experience anymore. They're giving you directions,
Mhm. Mhm.
and then it becomes the,
Mhm. Mhm. So the people that are out here listening that maybe are struggling with their own physical disability, what would you recommend to them?
for physical disability. Don't be afraid to ask for help. That's the first thing. As a species, we have trouble asking for help because it shows weakness. Or
I
people,
just talked to someone about this earlier today,
yeah,
another podcast. I
you
talked
can't be
to
afraid.
another guy about this whole thing of just like there's so much stigma around guys asking for help.
Yes,
Guys being vulnerable makes you
yes.
soft. You don't want to be soft. Yeah, right.
Well, I was raised without a father. My dad died before I was born. So I never had that toxic masculinity in my life. Never. I never seen my mother be hit. I've never seen my mom be disrespected. And I don't treat women that way. And I think we need to let men learn that it's okay to have emotions and to feel them emotions because when you don't, you're a pressure cooker.
That's a very good point.
And we spoke before. I take an hour a day to myself to deal with the feelings of the previous day. And I don't care if you meditate, if you read a book, just quiet time to reflect on how you feel will help you.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, somebody could
Mm-hmm.
have told you off the day before and you didn't even know it hurt your feelings till the next day.
Absolutely. Yes, I would say holding space for your feelings is so important, even if it's like a 5 minute emotion meditation,
Yep.
where you're thinking about from the time you opened your eyes until now, what emotions you felt today. Just even today, you spend 5 minutes thinking about the 6 primary emotions. When did you feel anger, sadness, fear, shame, love, joy? Just doing that for 5 minutes, you recognize, like, wow, I had a lot more emotions than I realized I had, because we're conditioned to just be busy,
Yes.
be thinking about stuff, be analyzing, problem solving, push your
Yep.
feelings down, keep going, right? So we don't know what we're feeling, and it's particularly helpful at the end of the day if you feel disturbed but you're not sure why. You can
Hmm.
do like a 5-minute emotion meditation and just see, like, what's there. And a lot of times you'll realize, oh wow, it's about this sadness about this story I heard today, or it's, my anger about the fact that somebody didn't respect my boundaries, or whatever the case may be. That you recognize and, like, hold space for your feelings, because if you don't, they'll eat you up and they will come out sideways.
Yes, ma'am.
So, the key for, I think, a lot of us as adults, especially if, like, let's say you're a man, or maybe you were raised in an environment where it wasn't okay to have your feelings.
Hmm.
You were yelled at if you were afraid or sad or, angry, or so for those of us that also weren't allowed to have feelings, that are women too, just part of our task as adults then is learning how to have our feelings so that we can identify, like, how do I feel? And then, you know, based on our emotions, we can say, oh, this is an unmet need of mine. If I'm afraid, it means an unmet need of mine is safety. What am I afraid of? Well, do I need to talk to someone about this?
I think you
Right? So,
go through your emotions. If
yes,
you don't let them out, is the danger,
right. Yes,
because then they're gonna come out when you don't want them to.
absolutely. Hmm.
And therapy is the perfect place to deal with your emotions, because you may not know what triggered you, or you even may know, but there's someone there to literally make sure you're okay and help you through and teach you skills to do this when you're alone.
Hmm. I mean, I have a therapist. I probably always will. I see the benefit of it. Absolutely. If it's not a therapist, find someone in your life that's earned your trust, that you can talk to about what's going on in your life, and you can reason things out with someone else. Because a lot of things in life, for me, can be confusing sometimes, like, and I'm not really sure how to feel about it. And I kind of need to, like, talk about it to, like, hear what other people's perspective is, and, like, reason things out with them. Uh, that's so important. But also, something you mentioned earlier is that it's important to be able to tap into your own resources and give yourself what you need in terms of, like, be your own biggest fan, and encourage yourself, and, like, don't bully yourself. Like, say something motivational instead, and just as it is important to have other people there, if you don't have people there, if you're someone that doesn't have people and you don't have a therapist, like, you can also do a lot of good for yourself if you quit bullying yourself the times you feel
Yes.
shame, the
Yep.
times you feel shame. Oh, that was the other thing I was going to say about emotion meditations, that a lot of people don't realize until they do emotion meditations, just how much shame they do have in their
Whether it's
lives.
justified or not.
And if you notice, oh, I felt shame when I came downstairs and I noticed that the house was messy, it's like, oh, okay, you felt shame. How were you talking to yourself? Were you saying to yourself, what kind of self-respecting adult lives like an animal?
Hmm.
Did you talk to yourself that way? Maybe you want to rethink that. So that next time you come downstairs and the house is messy, you're not going to pick up a stick and beat yourself with it. if you
Having
stop
good
bullying yourself,
conversations.
yeah, if you stop bullying yourself and you start being your own biggest fan and like encourage yourself and motivate yourself and validate your own feelings and really show up for yourself. Because our mind is the most powerful thing in the universe is our mind. And we can manifest positive things happening
Yes, absolutely.
just by what we focus our minds on. And it's like, think about it. That's pretty amazing. It's
The only
empowering.
person, the only person that got me where I'm at is me. I had help, but the decision was mine to make, and no one can take that from me. And empowering in itself, because we can help ourselves. You don't have to. There's help out there. But when you, it's the little victories. Oh, I feel better, or I dealt with this situation and now I understand, or I know that with this person I feel better, or I feel terrible, and you can accordingly either be more with that person or avoid them.
Mm-hmm. Right. Mm-hmm. Right. So I'm just even more amazed by your story and the things that you've done. I love your vibration. You're like one of my favorite people in the world, and now that's
Thank
even
you.
more true. You've
Same.
just got such a good heart and such a positive vibe. And you're out here doing the same thing I'm trying to do, which is like reach out to people, maybe say some things that inspire them, maybe say some things that will give them some ideas about how they can help their mental health
Yep.
and how they can get through things and they can thrive in the face of adversity, and to just not give up, just believe in yourself and have hope.
I've been through a lot, and I told you last time we spoke, not only was I in a crash in 86, but in 2005, another drunk driver ran into me, my daughter, and 5 children head on. He was trying to commit suicide, and he chose the next oncoming vehicle, which happened to be mine. That one back in. One of the girls was severely injured. My daughter was injured, and the guy got 30 days in jail because it was his first offense. At that point, most people probably have been like, whoa. It just made me more determined to try to help more people to stop that behavior. That's what gave me the impetus to do it while you're young. Helping can teach behaviors easier than correcting behavior.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And I learned that with my kids. When they're littler, it's easier to guide them the direction you want to go. As they get older, they're making their own decisions, and it gets harder and harder.
Mm-hmm.
Teach what you want before it's a bad lesson.
And parents also, the message is don't buy your kids alcohol.
Yes. That was that in our, and you remember, we were provided alcohol. We would have got it elsewhere, but and people are still doing this. And everyone listening out there, if you're giving your kids alcohol, you are setting them up for failure. You're too young at that age to understand what you're doing. I'm proof of it. And there's millions of other people that are proof of this, that your brain is not fully developed at 17.
No.
And you may think you're an adult, but you're not.
Right.
And adults providing you with alcohol is like, and I said this before, you put one bullet in your gun, roll the chamber, and put it to your head. Every time you get, and that's what you're doing, playing Russian roulette.
Absolutely. I agree. 150%. Yeah. So, if today's podcast helps one person think twice before they get behind a wheel, like
Absolutely.
it was worth it. Thank you so much for sharing your story with me today. Like I said, I'm even more in awe of you and just the things that you've been able to overcome. And I mean, it's incredible.
Anything is possible. Manifest and try. If you don't try, you don't know.
Mm-hmm.
My daughter teaches yoga. My son's a school teacher. He teaches science. I raised a shaman and a scientist, and they both are good human beings. And that was what I wanted. I don't care what they did. I just want them to be good people.
Same.
You know, you could drop your wallet. My son would give it back to you. He wouldn't take the money. That's a good person. And it's not hard. It's a choice, like putting on what shoes you're going to wear to work, what coat you're going to wear. Being a good person is a choice.
And it's so satisfying to know that, like, we did a good job raising our kids, even though we were young, even though we might have made mistakes, our kids
Absolutely.
turned out okay, despite us.
Well, everybody makes mistakes.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
You know, and raising kids is not easy.
No, and when you're young, especially, wow. I mean, it blows me away. I was a baby, so were you.
Yep.
We'll have to do another podcast. We'll have to do another podcast on being a young parent and the dangers of being a young parent and the things we learned about being young parents, because it's like, wow. So thank you again for your time today and for sharing more of your story. I'll be back on the show another time. You have so much wisdom and strength and inspiration to share with people. So
thanks. I'm glad you're doing this. This is going to help a lot of people, Doc. This is going to help a lot of people.
I think so too. I'm excited.
Stories are how we learn. And for thousands of years, before we had written words, we told stories. And that's what is the way to get into people, is not through writing books, but tell your story. Tell the truth. Tell what happened to you. It's genuine. And when people hear it, they can relate.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much. This was really awesome. And I want to have you on the show another time. So stay tuned.
Can do one on paganism.
There you go. Hey, I'm open to that. I am, for sure. All right. It was good to see you. I hope that you enjoy the rest of your weekend.
You too, Doc.
Judy. Okay. Take care.
You too, hon.
Bye.